On today's episode, we are going to take a look at Square, ticker SQ. They reported earnings yesterday after hours, and they were amazing that the stock price is now up almost 13% at the time of this video, reaching all-time highs. So today's episode is going to be broken down to the following. First, we're going to take a look at the earnings recaps. Then we're going to look at their financial numbers, and at the end, I'm going to end with my thoughts. Like always, my name's Jose Najarro. By day, I'm a senior electrical engineer, but by night, I'm a self-taught investor. Doing this for the past 5 to 6, 7 years, investing in companies that I enjoy and I understand for long-term investments. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and also don't forget to hit the thumbs up. It helps the channel out so much, and I truly appreciate it. Before we go any further, go down to the comments below and let me know, what are your thoughts on Square? Are you buying? Are you selling? Are you holding right now? While you're there, you should also see a link to my Discord channel. It's free to anybody that wants to join. I post every time I buy or sell a stock there. And down there, you should also see a link to Webull. If you sign up and follow the rules, we both could get a free stock. Sometimes they even do specials where we get 2 or 3 stocks. Finally, at the end of the day, I am not a professional, so none of this should be taken as advice. All right, so today we are taking a look at Square. When I did this video, the stock price is sitting at $196.58. This is up 12%, and this is, I'm pretty sure, all-time highs for Square. This is ticker SQ to all my podcast listeners. Right now, the market cap of this company is sitting at about $88 billion. Right now, year-to-date returns are in the 182% or a little bit higher probably right now, but it has been amazing. So congratulations to all the long-term holders of Square. All right, so now let's take a look at the highlights for the earnings. First thing, Q3 non-GAAP earnings per share were 34 cents, which beat by 18 cents. GAAP earnings per share were 7 cents, which beat by 15 cents. First thing we can see is Square is a profitable company when we look at both non-GAAP and GAAP earnings per share. Revenue for the company was $3.03 billion, and this beat expectation by $950 million. This is a huge beat, and we're going to talk about this revenue in a bit. I know a lot of people are talking how, hey, this is a company that most of this revenue growth is due to Bitcoin revenue, which is such a small portion of the company's, which has very low gross profit. And yes, we're going to talk about that later on in today's episode, so definitely stay tuned. So another thing we saw is Q3 gross payment volume increased dramatically. It was 31.73 billion versus the overall consensus, which was 29.95 billion. So now let's also take a look at some financial metrics. The first thing we're seeing is gross profit. Gross profit was 794 million, and this is up 59% compared to the same time last year. So yes, even though we have seen that strong up growth in revenue, and revenue is up 140% here, we can see, again, mainly due to the reasoning of Bitcoin revenue, we're still seeing gross profit, which is a very strong metric to look at, up 59% compared to the same time last year. Next, I want to take a look at seller gross profit. So if we're going to see, Square has pretty much 2 main markets. It has the seller market, and here they have the seller gross profit, and here's however they help companies and businesses be able to sell their products, to be able to handle business type customers, and we're going to talk about that later on. Then they also have the Cash App, which is more like a consumer base. They also have some business aspect here, but this is mainly the consumer based product or the buyer, for example. So they're hitting both ecosystems. They're hitting both the seller ecosystem and the buyer ecosystem, and I think that's actually pretty amazing for our company. So their seller gross profit was 409 million, and this was up 12% compared to the same time last year. One of the reasons we have to understand is right now, a lot of businesses are being affected pretty heavily due to COVID-19. So to still see a 12% growth rate in gross profit, I think it's very impressive. We can see Q2 of this year, which was one of the biggest affected quarter due to COVID, took a big hit, but now is back up to higher levels. Next, we're going to see that Cash App gross profit. This is 385 million, and that's up 212% compared to the same time last year. This is their Cash App, which now we're going to see has so many new platforms that is driving more customers and consumers to use it. And we have a net income gain of about $37 million. So we can see definitely a very low profit margins, but profitable nonetheless. So let's take a quick look at some of the cool products or kind of the cool stuff that Square is working. First, on the third quarter, we're seeing this is their Cash App application. First thing we're seeing is Cash App monthly active has increased dramatically. We can see this huge growth there. Next, we're seeing the Cash App daily actives, and that almost doubled compared to same time last year. And now it represents almost a quarter of the Cash App's monthly active users. And this is telling me one thing, that right now, Cash App has transformed how it's doing the applications and the more the services that it provides, that people are using it more frequently. I guess investors are really hopeful that this is something that they can continue to monetize. So by seeing more of an active daily increasement, we're going to be able, or Square investors or Square as a business is going to be able to monetize them more and collect more revenue from there. Then we're also seeing outside parties. So in the market outside the United States, seller gross payment volume, GPV, which is a very strong metric for most of these fintech businesses, grew 46% compared to the same time last year, and it now represents 11% of the total seller GPV. So outside the US, GPV from online channels grew more than 60% compared to the same time last year. And this is pretty much driven by the overall expansion that Square is doing, especially now with COVID situation. They really became super aggressive into moving to this more of e-commerce platform as well, and have innovations to help businesses transact from a brick and mortar store to more of an e-commerce type seller. Next, we're going to take a look at Square Card. So Square's card is pretty much a business debit card. It's probably the easiest way to explain. And it's growing pretty dramatically from when it started in 2019, quarter one 2019. So we can see this growth. Now it's about $250 million are being used through Square Card, and this gives a way for businesses to immediately access their funds and give Square another way to monetize its seller ecosystem. So we can see definitely Square is trying to hit different platforms, from the e-commerce, business selling, to as well as normal business transactions. They also have stuff like instant payments, which allow merchants to pay employees using funds from accounts and move them instantly to Cash App or next day delivery via direct deposits. On-demand pay is also there, which gives access to pay sooner by transferring X amount of earned wages pay period into Cash App accounts. So we can see this ecosystem that Square is building, and it's increasing dramatically. All right, so next let's take a look at their balance sheet. But before we do that, below you should see a link for 7investing.com, where every month they recommend 7 stocks for $17 a month. But if you use my promo code JOSE or the link I have there, you'll get $10 off your first month. May I say, yes, this is an affiliate program, but I use their services and recommend it to anyone. All right, so let's jump into their financial numbers. First, I want to take a look at their revenue. So here, I want to take a look at the revenue breakdown. So they have 4 segments of revenue. The first one is transaction-based revenue. So this is every time you use Square, you use one of their applications, they take some fee from this transaction base. Then they have subscription and services. If you're running a form of e-commerce business or just a form of business, you have a subscription with them to be able to track stuff, to be able to use their products, to be able to use their hardware. So that's their subscription. Then they have the hardware revenue. The hardware revenue is just a small dongle or whatever type of, maybe the iPad or the transaction thing that they have. If you go to most stores and you see that white box, that's sometimes Square, it's also other competitors. And then they have the Bitcoin revenue. So we can see Bitcoin revenue makes up more than 0.5% of this total revenue. And no, this is something a lot of bears mention about Bitcoin. I do understand why they mention it, but that should only be an issue to investors that don't know that that's really there, right? We can see that the gross profit for this is pretty small, right? We can see they made about $1.63 billion of revenue in Bitcoin, and the cost to make those sales was $1.6 billion. So it was only about a $30 million gross profit out of that $1.6 billion. So it is profitable. And yes, if you're taking a look at total net revenue, it's kind of I want to say it's kind of misleading. But if, as an investor, one should understand that. And once you understand that, I don't think it's much worry about. We can see transaction-based revenues grew 13% compared to the same time last year. We see subscriptions grew 60% compared to the same time last year. And we see hardware grew 25% compared to the same time last year. So even the other departments are still growing at very strong levels. And my favorite one is obviously that subscription growth. The cost for those is only $66 million out of that $447 million that they have. So that's, I think, one of my favorite platforms, or in almost any companies right now, subscription and service-based cost is, in services are probably one of my favorite types of revenue collected. And that's the one I'm seeing the most growth right now. Next, I wanted to take a quick look at their assets. First thing I'm seeing is a huge growth in cash and cash equivalents, almost by $1.1 billion. And also a huge increase in investments in short terms, almost by $300 million. We're also seeing, that's pretty much it. So that's about, they right now mentioned that they have about $3.3 billion in cash equivalents, and restricted cash. And they also, and investments in marketable debt securities. They also have about $500 million available from withdrawal in their revolving credit. At the moment, I don't believe they have any of that on usage right now. So they have about $3.8 billion of cash, of liquidity available to them. Now let's take a look at their total liabilities. Total liabilities, long-term debt, they have about $1.8 billion. So they have plenty of cash and cash equivalents to pay off all that debt. That to me tells me is their balance sheet is pretty great. Even if they pay off all their long-term debt, they still have cash left over to continue to run the business. It's already profitable, and we're going to look, they also have positive cash flow from operations. So this is definitely telling me that this is a balance sheet I don't have to worry about. Like I mentioned here, net cash flow from operations were $260 million. It is down compared to the same time last year. A little bit unfortunate to see that. But again, we are in a whole different situation right now with the COVID stuff. So something just to keep in mind of. It's still positive. So that's all I'm happy. The only thing I want to talk about is in financing activities. One of the big reasons this company got a lot of cash this quarter, we saw that huge boost in cash, was they did issue some convertible senior notes. Understandable if they want to build cash right now. All right, so now let's take a look at their growth. So Square is expected to grow its revenue 19.3% on average annually for the next 3 to 5 years. That's a strong growth. To me, if you guys have been watching, anything growing over 15% is, to me, consider a high growth stock for the next 3 to 5 years. So that definitely hits the mark. It's also expected to continue to grow its earning growth. It's already profitable and is expected to maintain profitability as the years progress. Next, I want to take a look at their historical past growth. In 2019, it grew 42%. In 2018, it grew closer to 50%. And in 2017, it grew about 30%. So not only in the future, but historically, it has shown that it is growing at dramatic levels. Next, I want to take a look at their gross margins. Gross margins were increasing over time, but kind of flatline now, sitting in the low 40%. I do think gross margins are going to take a big hit now, especially with that huge boost in revenue from Bitcoin. But that huge revenue is also very low gross margin. So we are going to see a decrease in gross margins due to that aspect. And again, this is something to understand as an investor. Once you understand, is something not to be completely fearful about. Profit margins, I was going to say, are probably going to be in similar things where, yes, right now, profit margins we can see from Square, they were negative. And this to me is a perfect example of a growth stock story. You buy it right now, it starts off with low earnings. It starts to improve over time, and then you become profitable, and then those earnings begin to multiply and multiply and multiply. And this is the strength of a growth stock, and why I'm very, very happy to invest in companies like this. All right, so finally, I'm gonna talk about my thoughts on Square. But before we go any further, don't forget to check out the merch, guys. Self-taught investor, like I mentioned, I've been doing this for the past 5, 6, 7 years. So this to me is the perfect merch that I can come up, and it's a great way to support the channel, and I truly, truly appreciate it. All right, so let's take a look at Square. So Square, I have Square to my left, and I'm looking at both forward PE and forward price to sales ratio. I also wanted to take a look at PayPal. To me, this is probably the closest competitor I can think of. If someone else might have a closer competitor, feel free to let me know on the comments. But Square, if we're looking at forward PE ratio, look, forward PE ratios for 2020, and these are non-GAAP numbers, is 252. Then it drops down to 146. Yes, they are pretty high, but you see that growth percentage decrease. That shows that growth is coming really strong from Square. Forward price to sales ratio for December 2021 is 7.46. Next, I have PayPal. So PayPal, you can see the forward PE ratio is a lot lower, but you can see year over year the decrease is also a lot lower, where Square jumped from 252 down to 146 in 2 years. PayPal jumps from 54 to 45. So PayPal is already profitable as well, a lot more profitable, but it's not growing at the same terms. If we're looking at forward price to sales ratio, PayPal is actually a little bit more expensive when compared to Square. So many people might be like, hey, Jose, this means Square is cheap right now. But that's not the only thing. What I wanted to take a look at is look at Square's and PayPal's margins. So we can see too, the lighter blue is PayPal, the darker blue is Square. So Square's gross margins are a lot lower than PayPal on average. So if they are a lot lower than average, then that to me is understandable why PayPal, when looking at forward price to sales ratio, is a bit more expensive. So what are my thoughts on Square? I'm really liking the Square. I like how, not the Square, I'm really liking Square. How they're really hitting both ecosystem from the buyers and the sellers. They're improving their Cash App. We're seeing strong growth there. We're also seeing strong daily active growth there. We're seeing the innovation in their seller side. So, and we're seeing strong growth, dramatic increase even outside that Bitcoin. And we're seeing a huge growth in gross profit, which in my opinion is the biggest metric to look at. I do believe maybe right now the stock price is a bit high, but let's say I have a position on Square, and like I mentioned, all my positions are free to anybody that wants to look at them in my Discord channel. Feel free to check down the link below and sign up there. But Square, if let's say I did not have a position, if I did not have a position, I would enter Square right now with a small entry to have some skin in the game, because one doesn't know, stock price can continue to go up. Right now, though, for me, Square might be a little overextended. So I already have a position. At this moment, I'm not willing to add right now. And that's the difference, right? It's, to me, it always depends. It's always different in different situations. If I don't have a position, I still like to get skin in the game. If I have a position and I'm happy with my position size, I really start to think and see if there's other investments out there that I would prefer putting my money in. Right now, I'm happy with my position size on Square. At the moment, not really into buying more, but that's just because of my position size. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up. It helps the channel out so much, and I truly, truly appreciate it. Take care, guys. Have a good night, and see you next time.